In my previous video, I supercharged my centrifugal dust separator by adding a third stage. It made it highly effective, especially for the very fine dust particles. And that made many of you wonder if I can do the same with the commercial cyclone separator, because marketing claims they win every single time. Only your experience is different and filters still clog quickly. So I accepted your challenge and filtered out lots of fine dust while testing. Only my big question is, how far can we push this? Because from 99% until 99.99% there are lots of levels to gain. Hey, hello everybody! I'm Ruud and welcome in my world of capturing dust. This journey started with me solving the dust problem of my ChemVac, because it filled up every 10 minutes while planing. To save on floor space, I designed a centrifugal dust separator that fits snugly above my planer, was easy to empty and just looked cool. It took me several tweaks to reach a separation effectiveness close to 99.9%. That was far beyond good enough. And I was blown away by how many of you engaged with the videos, joined my Patreon and contributed to the design. Makers from Oregon to Australia are all building my separator for their own workshops. So now it's time to do something for the cyclone owners. I instead needed to buy one, but that took 90 days before it was delivered in Holland. And my expectations were pretty high. It looks like almost every woodworker uses them. So I started to build a base plate for it in the style of my own centrifugal separator, only this time I used a touch of black. Some extra printed parts, lots of compression tape and 6 carriage bolts needed to ensure for a proper airtight fit to the base plate. For a fair comparison with my own separator, I also used the Festool dustbin in this design and added the Festool T-lock for easy changing of the bin. The latch needs some downward pressure to seal the bin tightly on the tape. And some guidance blocks will hold the bin in place. Even though I try to make this design as compact as possible, it still is huge. And that doesn't account for the Y piece that I need to connect it to the filter tube. Yeah, the only way forward is to reorganize the workbenches. And I have built them modular, so that would be an easy fix. To make sure that the waste bin can be removed easily, a bit more thought went into the design of a MacGyver style bracket to hold everything in place and ensure that the tubes can be connected. So for all of you who are new here on the channel, let's get you up to speed on the test setup that I used and built in the previous videos. For the extractor I use a triple motor ChemVac with Nanomax pleated filters inside of it for maximum performance. And I made myself a filter tube with 5 small pleated filters in it with a large filter area, so the pressure loss is very low. I can remove it easily out of the bracket and weigh it on a scale, so I don't need to empty the ChemVac after each test. Some of you spotted the problem with the gutter. It spilled out some dust at very high feed rates, messing up the results. You suggested to print an end cover to fix it. Only I was a little bit lazy. That's why I used tape. It holds very well, but the Cyclone had some trouble keeping up with the shavings at high feed rates. Slowing down the infeed was a bit of a challenge. With all the 3 motors enabled, planer shavings are sucked in very rapidly in large chunks. I tried to slow them down by dosing them by hand, and it was a little bit more controlled with only 2 motors enabled. Though the airflow was very limited with only 1 motor. It definitely had a really hard time sucking up the shavings. The flex hose also filled up, so it's definitely underpowered in this way. In total I tested 15 times with different feed rates and motor combinations, but settled on a very consistent effectiveness of 99.9%. Only at very high feed rates it dropped below 99%. And 1 motor also performed surprisingly well, considering that it is underpowered. To be sure that my filter tube isn't affecting the test, I tried again without it. But it had the same results. The airspeed was around 7.1 meters per second. And in this test it's even visually better noticeable. With all the 3 motors enabled, the shavings are picked up far further away from the inlet. With only 1 motor, I almost needed to plunge it into the dust pile before the shavings can be pulled in. So the right amount of airflow at your tools is crucial in a properly designed dust collection system. That's why I try to boost the performance even more by blocking the motor outlets of the 2 motors that were not in use. It increased the airflow with a lot. Without the cyclone, on 1 motor, the difference was almost not measurable. And because the ball valves made a really big difference, I will use them in the upcoming tests. To see if the tube size on the outlet will make any noticeable difference, I also experimented with 2 different sizes. The cyclone outlet is 150mm, so I changed it to a bend that reduces the size to 100mm. I tested the resistance with a small tube filled with some water and connected it in front and after the cyclone and tubing. Its results disappointed me. The resistance looked higher on the 100mm setup, but multiple measurements were all over the place. It didn't affect the airflow from the ChemVac though. Now time to step over this disappointment and build back our test filter to proceed with the hardest material that I will process in my shop. A mixture of MDF dust and plywood from the cabinet saw. Very fine dust particles reached the filters and settled on the tube wall, even at low feed rates. When I increased the feeding speed, it became clear that the cyclone couldn't handle all the dust and the filter filled up quickly. Between the different motor combinations, I cleaned out the filters to ensure consistency in the tests. It was a dirty undertaking which made me more excited to solve later on and try to eliminate. When we compare the test with the platinum shavings, we see a completely different result, with test points all over the chart. The MDF dust mixture, with 2 motors enabled, looked like to have the best results and almost touched 99.5% once. The very high feeding speeds will only occur in my shop when I vacuum up a large piles of dust from the floor, or maybe in the future when I will implement a floor sweeper. So for now, let's focus on the lower feeding speeds and try to capture the dust before it will reach the filters. To get a better feeling with the amount of dust that the tool is able to produce in a certain amount of time, I did set up a simple test with my punch cut saw and measured the dust bag before and after. I used 80mm MDF for this test, and it will be a lower limit because a cabinet saw can process much more wood in the same amount of time because of its higher power, so it also will produce more dust. My cordless saw though had an average about 10 kg an hour, and that's why I'm shifting my focus to the first part of the chart. Now let's pick the lowest and the highest test results and visualize the amount of dust between those 2 test results. For each kilogram of processed dust, this is almost 20 g difference, not talking about the planer shaving test that reached an effectiveness of 99.9% and only 1 gram of weighable dust reached the filter. To close this gap, we need to filter out almost 26 grams of ultrafine dust particles that still escape the cyclone. And I have a good feeling that my third stage design that I've built and designed a year earlier for my centrifugal dust separator is capable for this job. I'm only not sure how effective it will be for the ultrafine dust particles. They are very lightweight and need lots of rotational force to be pushed out of the airstream. The first tests were promising though, with only a very small amount of superfine dust accumulating on the wall of the filter tube. Now let's quantify the amount of dust that we have got captured. First, let's remember the total weight before we clean all the parts. And don't try this cleaning process without a good dust mask, because the ultrafine MDF dust particles that we have got captured are definitely not good for your health. I learned my lesson. Back to the weighing process of the captured dust. It's shy of 20 grams, so that's already promising. And I couldn't suppress my curiosity to do also a 70mm third stage separator test. The results over several tests turned out to be pretty inconsistent. Before we dive deeper into the numbers, I need to find a way to make this setup more compact. Maybe become friends with gravity, so it will work in our favor. The outlet tube is placed 180mm inside the Cyclone. That is something I want to take advantage of, but for now I made it fit on top to see what happened during the test. The collection core can be printed without support material. It slides over the tube with the impellers. I also added a smaller inner ring for easier adjustment to the tube size, but that didn't work out the first time. Yeah, the core pillars were not strong enough, but I needed test results, so glue to the rescue. Luckily, that first test surprised me. The ultrafine dust particles are clearly separated from the airstream and are spinning in the upper chamber. They colliding with each other, and then, when they become too heavy, they go down by gravity. Only the slots in the collection chamber are not big enough for the accumulating dust. So I made angle slots that are bigger in size in the hope that dust will be forced through them and still keep the light dust spinning above it. It was a small improvement, but still not enough. After multiple tests, the static charge dust became noticeable. Okay, let's do one more speed test to see how quickly dust builds up. After a couple of seconds, the upper chamber is already filled up fully, and the remaining dust goes into the filter tube. With my focus back on the lower feeding speeds, the results turned out to be very consistent, with all the measurements on or above 99.9% separation effectiveness based on the weight of the dust. Only after plotting the captured dust amount, there was something off. It just wasn't anywhere close enough to match our test results with only the Cyclone. And that dust has to go somewhere, right? Let's go a few steps back and recreate the second stage setup without the separator core inside of it. Just an empty tube. After a few tests, it turned out that the 100mm tube that was sticking out into the Cyclone outlet created an interesting effect. Dust was spinning between the two walls and preventing dust to escape from the Cyclone. This effect alone was good for a 50% increase in the captured fine dust. And that is wonderful, because that is dust that we don't need to clean out of our second stage. And with all the other tests, I got stuck between 99.9 and 99.98%. I experimented with different core designs, and I ended up with a version that could work with an adaptable ring to separate the upper and the lower chamber. When I look back on the test results and experiments in this video, I have a really good feeling about what is possible with this supercharged Cyclone concept. The combination of the Cyclone and a centrifugal dust separator is very effective, and I never imagined that we come that close to 99.99%. And that made me very curious about your view on this project as a side quest on the centrifugal dust separator. There are already community members helping with the design of a fully 3D printed version of this separator with an integrated second stage. Because when we can turn this proof of concept into a compact design with an easy to empty second stage, that could become a very effective separator design as well. So I'm excited to see where this path will bring us. And a special thanks to the Patreon who spent hours on his watch time, adding closed captions to all of my videos. Impressive. And thank you for reaching the end of this video. I'd like to hear your thoughts about this project and hope to see you in the next one. Houdoe!